Well, as long as we're on the topic of motor maintenance, let's talk slow motors. This is a slow motor that has not been maintained, I would guess, forever. They're not supposed to do that. So, just another quick look around. Depending on the orientation of this motor, it makes more noise in some ways than others. And we're almost certainly hearing a completely oil-starved bearing. Let's get inside this guy and figure out exactly what's going on. I'm going to mention one more thing, since I know this is going to require a bit more disassembly than a bit of a spot lube to get it back to where I want it to be. Here's a quick little trick to make sure you get it put back together again the right way. That way you know which way to point the pointy part of the rotor up, and that'll come off before you send it back to the customer. Just use isopropanol. And I forgot to mention one more thing. You're going to want to deburr that shaft on both ends so that you're not pulling it through the bearing. You see there's some rust on the shaft there? That has to be smooth before you can pull it through the bearing, or you're going to damage the oilite. So the easy way to do that is with a sanding sponge and a power switch. And I'll just, I can't do it while I'm holding the phone here, but what I'll do is I will put those nuts back on. I'll deburr the shaft by running the motor with it until I feel that it's smooth, and then I'll be able to pull that bearing right off with virtually no resistance whatsoever. Remember that we need to protect the oilite bearing that's inside there from any further damage. It's essentially a metallic sponge that oil has to go through, and if you score it, you essentially kind of like push the holes in the sponge together, and that'll prevent the oil from reaching where it needs to go over the next 20 years. Or if the owner is a really good guy, over the next year. This is a pretty nasty motor, but it came apart really easily, specifically because I smoothed that out. You see that the color has changed now. I lost the little washer there because I basically went up sanding a little bit of paint off there, but that's fine. What's important is that this is smooth because it has to go through that bearing smoothly. And also, you don't want rust roughing up the action when it's time for it to get reassembled and do a 2-speed stack where it needs to slide up and engage the rubber tire. Now this is something interesting to show you. I pulled this washer off of one of the bearing halves over there. It was stuck to the bearing where it's supposed to be. But what's interesting about this washer is this is, one of the steel ones, is that you can see, if I can get the focus right here, you can see that the inside of it is shinier than the outside, and if you actually rub it in your hands, you can even feel it's a little bit thinner on the inside. So there's been a lot of wear there, and that's probably one of the things you heard screeching. So this one here is not going to get put back in that motor. It's going to get replaced. So after the bearings are all cleaned up, what I like to do is I like to put them like this. And I already lubed them once. And what I'll do is I will actually lube them until I can't get them to take any more lubricant. It takes a little bit of time sometimes for the felt to fully absorb all the oil that you can get in there. And I'll let them sit for a while. And the reason I'm showing you this is this is one I did, I think last night, or maybe the night before. And when I sat it down overnight, it leaked out all this nasty honey-like lubricant. So when I cleaned this one up, there's a fair bit of that in the top, but I didn't flush it out with a solvent, because I don't like doing that if I don't need to around these things. But the oil that I put in displaced some of this old nasty oil, and that just started leaking out from the plate that holds the bearing and the felt in place. So I'm going to go back and reclean this one, and I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive with the solvent this time and get all of that old lube out. Now that old lube is incorrect lubricant that was used before. If it was only factory lube, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have done that. And then I will re-lube it with the proper lubricant. And that's important because you have to get the felt saturated in order to get anything going through the oil light over time. And you can also re-impregnate the oil light to a certain extent just by filling the bearing with oil and then pressing it as hard as you can together with your thumb to just try and force a little bit through the bearing walls. And I didn't make that procedure up. It's from oil light. Here's that rotor again. It's been cleaned up quite a bit. I use a combination of Spray 9, CRC QD, elbow grease, paper towels, and rust converter in order to do these, and very light sanding as well. So what I did was I removed the worst of the surface oxidization. You want to be careful. You don't want to alter the shape of the squirrel cage, but getting the flakiest of the rust here off will actually help the motor work better. Now's probably a time to caution people against going crazy with the rust converter as well. Do not use very much at all. All you're trying to do is get the remaining tiniest bits of red iron oxide to turn black. You need to know the product that you're using in order to make sure that you get to that point. Your best weapon is mechanical rust removal if you can do so carefully. I use this product, which is available in Canada. I don't know if it's available in the US or not, which is tannic acid, phosphoric acid in a solution of isopropanol. And it's gentle but effective. But the biggest advice I can give you is if you're using anything like that on your Leslies, and that goes not just for motor parts, but also the motor cases themselves and whatnot, it'll take off paint if you're not careful. So know your product, know how much you need, know how long you can leave it on without causing damage. What I really got the camera out for was to point out where we heard all that screeching, and we could see that there is a clear wear on the shaft here where we've worn away the paint. That's not that unusual. I actually can't feel that ridge at all, but what I can see is this ridge right there. Let me see if I get the camera to show it to you. Anyway, there's a ridge right in here. I can feel that with my fingernail. I can actually get my nail in there. And what that means is that I have to be very careful of this rotor when I put it back in the stator. Because I have to make sure that the motor orientation I choose, whether it's fast or slow, and where the spacers are, and so on and so forth, that ridge does not traverse the edge boundary of a bearing, because if it does, it can get hung up on the bearing, especially as time goes by and this wear gets worse. And if it gets hung up on the bearing, then it might not be able to retract or push out properly. So I'm thinking that this will probably wind up being a fast motor so that I can actually have the tall spacer here. We'll see what happens when I measure things and put it back together again. Okay, the motor is back together again. It has been cleaned up. It's possible to get them cleaner than this, but law of diminishing returns makes that not a good use of my time or my customer's money. The motor is properly lubricated. This was a sidewinder inside some kind of internal Leslie inside an organ. And now it is an upper slow motor suitable for use in 122 or 147. And as you can see, it runs properly and completely quietly.